The Rico Tapes.
Good afternoon, Walter. How are you doing today? I picked a pint of strawberries for you from the farm. They're all coming in season now.
Hey, there's some good-looking strawberries. I'm thinking daiquiris already.
So, Walter, I see you're sitting in the park and on the bench and you're doing some sketching. What are you drawing today?
Same old stuff, Sharon. You know, I can sell a couple of these, I'll be alright. I was hoping I'd get that bartender job down there, but that fell through. But I got a few more interviews lined up.
Oh, man. I'm sorry to hear that, Walter. I thought you would be perfect for a bartending job. So what would you like to talk about today? About the unions?
Well, in the first place, Sharon, I don't talk about unions. I talk about labor organizations. Unions is an American word. Now, if I just got that job, I'd be all right. But I'd have to stay sober, and that'd be another job.
So, Walter, last time we spoke, you said you were going to talk about Section 9A the next time we got together.
That's right, Sharon. Section 9A. I did have a few things to say about that. I don't think there's a good understanding exactly just what Section 9A says in the National Labor Relations Act. And so let's spend the next minutes, let's spend this episode on that subject. So I'll just start off and I'll say, I just happen to have a copy right here. It says, representatives designated or selected for the purposes of collective bargaining by the majority of the employees in a unit appropriate for such purposes shall be the exclusive representative of all the employees in such unit for the purposes of collective bargaining in respect to rates of pay, wages, hours of employment, or other conditions of employment. Now we talked about all that last time, and I'm just saying this to refresh everybody where we're at. We're not talking about forming a union here. We're actually talking about how do we choose our representatives when we do want to negotiate a contract, when we do want to collectively bargain, when we sit down at the table across from the employers, when employees and employers come face to face. We need representatives representing us. And the law defines a very specific way we do this. And I don't think we've been doing it that way, the way the law asks us to do it. And notice that it says a majority of the employees must choose the representatives. I can't remember the last time in an IBEW local the majority of employees even showed up for anything.
So, Walter, is a unit a local union, or can it be a division of the local union?
A unit can be part of a local union, or it can be 100% of the local union. These days, it seems like the mega locals, they have 15, 20, 30, 40 units in them. You have 15, 20, 30, 40 different contracts. A unit used to be just one union when you went back to the 30s and the 40s. Everybody had basically the same in the union. But now they've gone to this unit structure and this mega local size, and it really does not serve the purposes of collective bargaining at all. And what's been lost in that is the idea of majority representation of the all the people in the, let's use the word union or labor organization. Because if you're let's say a residential worker, or you're an inside wireman, or you're a CWCE, you're probably broken up into different units, and you got each one voting on their own contract. But the local union is responsible for each one of those contracts. So whether you're a residential worker, you're responsible for the journeyman wireman contract. The journeyman wireman contract is responsible for every other contract. However, you don't see all these people showing up to vote for these things, but That's not the point of today. The point of today is who's negotiating these contracts and how do we choose them? Are we following the letter of the law when we choose these people? Or are we just shooting from the hip?
So, Walter, you're saying that the majority of the employees are not choosing the representatives for collective bargaining.
The majority of the employees in a unit are not choosing the representatives for collective bargaining. Not in the fashion that the law demands or allows. It's very clear when you first start a union that everybody gets together, like whether it's a Starbucks or Walmart, Amazon, whatever, and they get together and they choose who's going to represent them. Like nurses, and it would choose like the SEIU or the Nurses International Cooperative Union or something. It's abundantly clear right from the start where we are choosing a representative, and the representative we're choosing is the union, or we're forming our own independent union. And everybody understands at that point that, yeah, the union, the exclusive representatives is the group we choose, whether it's the IBEW, the SEIU, the Teamsters, whoever's representing you. So yeah, those are your representatives, and at that time it does take a majority of all the people in the unit to do that. So they negotiate the first contract, and after that first contract, it seems like this idea of choosing majority representatives goes away. People just go about their business. The officers take over, and everybody assumes and accepts the idea that the officers are the representatives, but they have never been chosen to be the representative. The word representative is not found in Article 17 of the IBEW Constitution, not even under duties of business manager. It's just an idea that's accepted that if somebody gets elected to president and business manager, they negotiate the contract. But that may not be true. That may not be according to the letter of the law. If you read the Constitution and the bylaws carefully, you will see that officers who are elected are assigned very specific duties, and these include the administration of the local union, not to represent anybody. So a lot of people will bitch and moan. They'll say, my union's not representing me. Well, basically, you don't have any representatives other than yourself. You are the representative. And we'll understand how we do that, get to that point in a few more minutes.
Okay, so Walter, you're saying the officers are not the representatives, but you say might be the officers are not because there was no representative election. So who put the body in charge? Is there some time of election? It just doesn't make sense to me, Walter.
So these unions, they have elections and they elect officers. When they elect officers, there's nothing saying they're representatives. It's just accepted that they are. But there's nothing in the Constitution or bylaws that specifically says that they are. So when we have these elections for officers, we don't elect representatives. And like I was saying earlier, there is some method where they're getting around this, and it's very obscure, and few are aware of it. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. The other thing to remember about when you elect officers, according to the law, according to Section 9A, it says a majority of employees in a unit, or let's say the local union when you elect officers, because the majority in a union of 10,000 employees would be 5,001. It's 5,000 is 50% plus 1 would be 5,001. I don't recall any IBEW election where you had that kind of turnout lately. In fact, it's far from that. It's much more dismal than that. It's like maybe 15%, 20%, and the people who win these elections are getting like 10, 11, 12% because they do have some little competition, but it's far from the 50% that the Wagner Act demanded back in 1935, and that has not changed. So what has changed? That's what we're going to have to talk about here.
So, Walter, who are the representatives of the local union?
The way it's set up right now, Sharon, is the membership, the voting body, is the representatives of the local union. That's the way it's set up right now. And few realize that, but the membership has so much power. And where they got it from is actually they delegated it to themselves. They never delegated it to any officer. No constitution, no bylaw gives any officer any representative power. But every day they drive around in shiny new full-length, full-stretch limo automobile. Let's not get overboard, but they drive around in big fancy cars. They wear nice clothes. They make twice as much as most of the rank and file, and they call themselves representatives. And that's how they go about their business. But they're not really representatives. The body is a representative. So if a contract is negotiated, regardless of who negotiated it, whether it's the elected officers or somebody else, or somebody they appointed, a lawyer or whatever, the body always has the final say. And the body always has the final say on every contract, whether it's an inside wireman contract, whether it's a residential contract, whether it's a teledata contract. Even though that's not the way it's being done lately, even though they might just draw in people who are specifically working for an employer or a contractor or a different unit and ask them for a cursory vote on an agreement with very short notice usually, and they consider that a ratification vote. It's not the full body acting on it a lot of times. And even when the full body does act on it, there's barely 200-300 people show up. But that would, as long as everybody's invited, that would be legal, of course, if they did it that way. But they could say the point here is the people negotiating the contract, they have what authorizes them to do it. And as I promised you, there's an end run they do around the law, and you might be surprised at how this goes.
Well, Walter, I love surprises, and I surprised you with some strawberries today that I picked myself, fresh from the farm. So tell me, how do they do an end run around it? Inquiring minds want to know.
So in most IBEW locals, and the mega locals too, they have what's called an exclusive hiring hall. And so everybody who's hired by an employer comes from that hall with a referral slip from the local union. And everybody who gets laid off comes back and signs the book. And then when they go out again, they have a referral slip. And when they do that, they ask them to sign a few things. They ask them, do you want to have dues check off? Whatever the Dobie might be, 2% or whatever, and you initial in a little corner, and you want to donate to COPE, initial here, right? And you can decline all of these. And there's another box that gets you to check that I don't know anybody that doesn't check it, but if you read the box before you sign it, it will say, like, let's say we're going to make up a local. We're going to say, local 555. Okay, it's a fictional local, but this is kind of universal in the IBEW, in their exclusive hiring hall system, where they get people just to check these things like it's basically necessary to get the job. It's like pressure to get the job. Might even be a Section 8B1 unfair labor practice. I don't want to go that far with it right now. Maybe one day we'll discuss that. but they ask people to sign this, and a lot of people do not understand what they're signing. So it's about time I broke the ice here and ended the suspense and actually read this. So if you're still with us, here's what I got. Here's what it says. It says, I authorize Local 555, the fictional local of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, to represent me as my National Labor Relations Act, Section 9A, bargaining representative in collective bargaining with present and future employers on all present job sites within the jurisdiction of the union. This authorization is non-expiring until such time as I submit a written revocation to IBEW local union number 555. So they get you to sign that, and basically when you do that, you're assigning your Section 9A bargaining rights to that local union. If you read the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, Section 9A, they say that it's a majority of employees in an election, not really an election, but designated or selected for the purpose of collective bargaining by the majority of the employees in a unit. So when you sign that, you're giving away those rights, and also at the same time, you're basically voiding the possibility of any type of election that would demand majority support. So suppose that the group gets together and decides we have a contract coming up and we want to decide who's going to be our negotiators. So we want to have a voice in who's negotiating the contract. It would take 50% of everybody to decide. Like in a 10,000 person local, that would be 5,001 people. Do you know how hard that would be? You know how difficult that would be to even get that kind of response, that type of engagement. So the idea that they're doing this with by sending these out with the referral slips and getting people to sign this at the time of referral, they're doing a big end run around what could be a very stiff legal requirement. And something like this could actually be challenged by a group like NECA. But from my point of view, they don't want to challenge it because they're perfectly content with the way it is right now, where people are not coming together, they're not organized, they're not engaged. And if you had to get 50% of the people engaged and organized and coming together, that'd be high risk to them, because they might understand the power of the working people coming together. So they're not going to rock the boat either. They'll continue to accept this, I'm going to say, bogus way of obtaining majority support. I think the proper way to do it would be to have an election every time you negotiate a contract. So let's say we're on a 3-year cycle. We have 3-year elections of officers. We would also have 3-year elections of representatives. Whether it's done at the same time or another time, that'd be something to discuss. But when contracts are coming, a lot of people are worried about what's going to be in the contract and how can I change the contract and how much money we're going to get. They ought to focus on who's negotiating the contract, because basically all they do is keeping pace with inflation these days. And because there's no real majority support of any contract, it's easy for them to keep us at a certain place without any accountability. Sharon, I really want to make that point clear, and I hope that it got off good, and I'm just wondering, did it all make sense to you?
So, Walter, pretend like I'm a 2-year-old and I don't understand anything yet. How would you sum up what you just said?
What I'm saying is that for collective bargaining to be successful, for the labor movement to continue, you need full engagement of the people in it. Wagner thought he could get by with just 50% engagement, And I think that would work too if we had 40% engagement even. But the law demands 50%. The C-suiters, whether they're in the local union or in NECA, they've decided another way of doing this, and say it's quasi-legal with this authorization form they get you to sign that many people are unaware of the ramifications of it, where you're sacrificing your Section 9A rights. And what it does, it's counterproductive to union democracy. People do not have to come together. They do not have to engage. And I think that if they did, the size of the mega locals, the 10,000 member mega locals, would not work. They'd have to go back down to the size that they used to be in the 50s and the 60s, when collective bargaining, when the labor movement was very successful, when it was at its peak, when the middle class was at its peak. So until we return to, we want to make the unions great again, we gotta study the unions of the 50s and the 40s, the 50s and the 60s, and we ought to try to resemble their size and structure and engagement, the full freedom of association that Wagner talked about.
Okay, Walter, well, we'll wrap it up for today, and I will catch up to you tomorrow, and we'll discuss more about Section 9, I guess. By the way, Walter, what's your favorite rum for that strawberry daiquiri?
My favorite rum, Sharon, is Jameson Black Barrel. Irish whiskey, triple distilled. Keep that damn sugar rum down in them islands.